has one of the toughest schedules in the country in 2023, and what makes it so tough is probably the skill level of the quarterbacks that they're going to face. Graham Hall of Swamp 24/7 recently ranked the top 5 quarterbacks that the Gators will play, and his list might not be what you're expecting. So let's get right to it. Graham, before we get into this list, walk us through your thoughts on UF's schedule overall next season and the skill of some of the opposing quarterbacks that they're going to have to go up against.
Absolutely. I think that when a lot of Florida fans, players, coaches saw this schedule come out, and then they saw the amount of incredible, impressive signal callers returning, and then the amount of on the cusp taking over quarterbacks that there were, it was pretty daunting to look at. And especially if you're one of those fans that was, I think, believing that in year 2, Florida would take a significant step forward and pick up multiple wins. But now it's going to have to come against multiple, like I said, impressive quarterbacks. One of the best parts about making these top 5 lists is someone is going to get left out. I know that a lot of people focus on the debate and the controversy, but really I think that you can make a case for a lot of quarterbacks in the SEC. There were multiple left out in the ACC and in the Pac-12 when you look at Florida's schedule, and that's what makes it so great. But I say this to people, really, for Florida right now, they should be less concerned with the quarterbacks they are facing than what's going on in their front yard, really, because after a 6-7 finish last year, it's really going to come down to those defensive improvements rather than one of these quarterbacks being stopped or having an off game, because there are so many impressive ones out there. Florida defensively has to make sure that they are prepared enough to have a chance against these quarterbacks. But I know that gets left out of the conversation a lot when you talk about these lists, and that's why they're so fun.
Right. Oh, they are fun, and this is what we do in the off season. So let's jump right into your rankings. Number 5, Carson Beck. Now, he hasn't officially been named the starter, but you've got him on here. Tell us more.
I do think he will become the starting quarterback. You know, you go back to when he was a highly touted recruit. I think number 3 pro-style quarterback in his class, really has been waiting in the wings, learning behind some impressive guys, learning the system. I think he's very comfortable right now. Although he wasn't, of course, handed the starting job, I do think that he will earn that. And if he is the starting quarterback, which I expect him to be, and again, you could have made a case for whoever is Georgia's starting quarterback being number 5 there on the list, in my opinion. Maybe that should have been prefaced, but again, that takes some of the fun out of the list, I would say. But really, with the amount of weapons that they have in Athens, I know that the offense may be a little bit more run-oriented this season, but I think that that'll give Carson Beck or whoever's the quarterback a chance to really be successful. We know they have the best tight end in the nation. I know that some Florida State fans may disagree with that, with the guy they got in there this season, but I think that Brock Bowers is fantastic. And then you add in Dominic Leavitt from Missouri, a former 5-star guy as well. There's no shortage of options for Carson Beck to be successful, and I think that he will be this season.
All right, number 4, Joe Milton of Tennessee. He is taking over, of course, for Hendon Hooker. What earned him a spot on your list?
Yeah, I know a lot of people think of him when he was at Michigan, and another guy who has, I think, benefited from the COVID, the additional time in college, now heading into his 5th year of college football. I know that people have this narrative that he just handed the ball off last season when he was in limited action, but it was a lot more than that. They have a lot of trust in him. And kind of the same thing with Carson Beck. I hate kind of making these caveats, but if you saw those spring game highlights from that true freshman quarterback, Nico, out there from California, I'm not even going to attempt to butcher his name on here, knowing that people could come back and hold it against me. But he has a chance. If you saw some of those passes, incredible. This is an excellent Tennessee offense in my mind. Brew McCoy coming back, a couple other weapons that I think are underrated there. They have 2 really good running backs, maybe 3. Jabari Small is back there as well. So I think that whichever quarterback, I think it's going to be Joe Milton, is the starter there, they have a chance to be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC this season. And I think that they're going to, bring it in that SEC opener on September 16th in Gainesville. Just, the rivalry, what happened last season, and Milton, I think that he's ready right now. But I can definitely see why that was maybe a little bit of a contentious pick. I just think that Milton is going to be a little bit better than many people outside of Knoxville are expecting.
I honestly thought Milton looked great in his limited role last year. He was fantastic in their bowl game. All right, number 3, Devin Leary at Kentucky, who transferred in from NC State. Tell us about him.
I think a lot of people are sleeping on Kentucky. That's kind of also a symptom maybe of people around here in Gainesville until recently, when this Kentucky program, really for the last 6 years, in my mind, has been pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Mark Stoops is back, but more importantly, you get Liam Cohen back running that offense. I think that Devin Leary was one of, if not the best transfer portal quarterback available. I think that he'll take over and have a really good chance. They got a really good running back in there as well, a 1,000-yard rusher from Vanderbilt, I believe, and Ray Davis. So you factor that in. I think that he has a chance to be very, very successful and he's going to put really good numbers. And I would not be surprised if we're sitting here at the end of the regular season talking about this guy being a future NFL player at the position. I think that he's really going to benefit this year and put up great numbers in the SEC. Cohen's return is massive.
All right, number 2, KJ Jefferson at Arkansas, who, of course, obviously UF will see later this season. Tell us a little bit about him.
I was really high on KJ Jefferson last year, so maybe there's some bias here, of course, in that one as well. I actually, so the craziness, if you're going to argue with this one, goes back to SEC Media Days last year when I put KJ Jefferson as my number 2 quarterback in the SEC on my official vote. I actually had to cast that one as well. Obviously, he had some injuries last year, wasn't as great as I thought he would be, but I still think after, the number 1 guy on this list that he is the best threat option in the SEC. And, that's that SEC bias coming in here that I know someone wants to argue with, obviously. But I think that when you look at what Jefferson did last year, I think he's improved as a passer, more accurate than advertised. I think that Sam Pittman keeps surprising people, and they're going to do so as well. And they were 7-6 last year. I think that when they come into Gainesville, you're going to have a really, really impressive performance from Jefferson in that offense. I would not be surprised if, when it comes to the opponents that Florida faces this season, that Jefferson, based on what we've seen, has one of the best games of any quarterback on Florida's schedule this season.
Graham, you're really making me super excited for this upcoming season. Let's go on to number 1, Jaden Daniels. He is the top spot for you. He's obviously the starting quarterback for LSU, who I feel like just always produces incredible talent. Tell us a little bit about him.
This is kind of one of my, I think, collective hot takes that I think LSU is going to be really, really good this year. You look at that defense, who they got, who they've added on offense as well, the recruiting that they've done in the last couple of years, and Brian Kelly. I'm a Brian Kelly believer, absolutely. I think that you also go back to that game last year. My coworker Jacob Rudner, I think, got to watch Jaden Daniels a lot more than a lot of people when he was covering him in Arizona State, and so he knew what Daniels could do last year. I was not a big believer, but then he came into the Swamp and absolutely tore the Gators up. I think that he's going to be even better next year across the entire schedule, and Florida knows what he can do to them. He is, in what I saw last year of the quarterbacks Florida faced, he's got to be the most impressive one in my mind in terms of just his dual threat ability for an SEC team, and I thought that was just it was clear-cut number 1 for me for him. I think that he is a true Heisman contender this season.
All right, so these 5 made the cut, but there's a couple that we didn't see. Let's start with beginning of the season. Cam Rising is not on your list. Is that injury related?
Absolutely. Kyle Whittingham, who I think great respect for, one of the best coaches in college football in my mind, if not the most underrated, said that they were cautiously optimistic that Cam Rising would be available for week 1 against the Gators. That is already, as we know, maybe way too early contest as well on a Thursday on August 31st out there. I don't know until I see him ready in fall camp. I'm not ready to put that guy on a top 5 list. If we're making a top 7, top 8 list, he is on there, absolutely. But again, this is about how daunting it is for Florida to face these quarterbacks. And week 1, a guy coming off a shoulder injury, they're not ready to even say, hey, we expect him to be ready for fall camp. You look around at a lot of these injuries out there, some of the guys, Michael Williams at Georgia, coaches are saying we expect him ready for fall camp. Until I hear that from a guy like Whittingham, I can't put him on my list and base it off that. I know that people are going to say, well, how can you pick someone who hasn't even been named the starting quarterback? That's a fantastic question. That's what these projections are. If you were to ask me if I thought that Cam Rising is going to be 100% ready, right now my gut tells me no. I'm more confident in thinking that Carson Beck is going to be the starting quarterback of Georgia come week 1, or when the Gators face him on October 28th, then I think that Cam Rising is going to be 100% non-rusty, super effective when he goes out there. on August 31st in Salt Lake City against the Gators. That's just what I base that take on. Obviously, I think Cam Rising is a really, really good quarterback, one of the Pac-12's best, if not the best quarterback in the Pac-12. I just am not sure yet how effective he's going to be against the Gators, and that's going to be something incredibly influential, I guess you could say, to monitor when it comes to evaluating how this game's going to play out in 4 months.
All right, here's the big one. Jordan Travis was rated number 1 overall by PFF last year for quarterbacks. He is second right now in Heisman Trophy odds. And I know you caught a little flack for leaving him off, but I would love for you to tell me why Jordan Travis is actually a big steaming pile of garbage.
I don't think that whatsoever. Like I had said with Cam Rising, if this list was 6, if this list was 7 or 8, Jordan Travis is on the list, and I can understand why some people even think that is too low. I think it speaks to how many impressive quarterbacks are on Florida's schedule. I can understand why opposing teams take it as a slight. That's what makes a lot of this so fun. I don't think Jordan Travis is a bad quarterback whatsoever. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he is, like Jane Daniels, a potential Heisman Trophy contender. Now, right now, I still have some questions. Could I be entirely wrong? Absolutely. That's what makes things like this so subjective, makes it so fun. I think that he could go out there and tear the Gators up, absolutely. But if you go back to that game, a lot of what we saw last year were, I think some inaccurate passes. I still have some questions about him as a passer. I do think he's a fantastic dual threat. He made a lot of Florida defenders look silly when it came to missed tackles last year. We just said 10 minutes ago about how much of these predictions are based on the belief that Florida's defense will take a step forward this season, which I do think is absolutely what we will see this year. I think that Florida will do a better job in that game on November 25th of limiting Jordan Travis, and I do not think he will have as high of a statistical output as some of these other teams on Florida's schedule. Jaden Daniels, I think KJ Jefferson, like I said, maybe that's just me. I think that he is a very, very impressive quarterback. You look at his completion percentage last year against SEC teams. Again, maybe that's some bias there. Definitely, you could say that. But I think that what he did last year in the SEC was as impressive, if not more impressive, than a guy like Travis. And when you see these rankings, a lot of people think, well, if you don't make the list, you have to be much worse. A lot of these are very narrow debates. That's why doing a top 5 list is a lot more fun than top 10, because if you include everyone on Florida's schedule, then there really isn't much. Yeah, that's not as much fun. You're just debating a few places here. And a lot of people take this as a huge snub to leave Jordan Travis off. And absolutely, he could prove that wrong, or he could go out there and complete 13 of 30 passes and get picked and get tackled a little bit more in the backfield and have not as effective a performance. We're just going to have to see how it plays out in 6 months, 7 months.
All right, so obviously this is preseason, so I'm going to, give you a little bit of an out here, but do you think Jordan Travis will be in your top 5 quarterbacks faced if you had to rank them in November, or are you just solid on this as your list?
I think that absolutely that's a great question, because this is an off-season list. I think that right now I need to see a little bit more as the season progresses. I need to make sure that Benson runs the ball 10 plus times a game. I need to make sure that offensive line lives up to, that's the biggest thing. So much of this is just assuming that the offensive line continues taking a step forward, that there's no setbacks there whatsoever. Injuries don't hinder the unit, because say what happens. I mean, Allie, you've followed the Gators for how long, right? Your entire life, right? What happened to a Florida team that went to the SEC East Championship 6 years ago? They had 27 guys injured for that game that made them look like they were absolutely inferior to their opponent in November, in early December. So many of these factors are going to play into what is going to happen in that game on November 25th. So I am looking forward to, at the end of the season, making a top 5 list of quarterbacks Florida faced and compare it to the one I put out in the second week of May, and see if I went 0 for 5, 1 for 5. And honestly, I would take getting a few right here. No one's going to be perfect, because if you read that list and knew exactly how the season was going to go out, I would lose all my excitement, right? Because we absolutely want to see how these things play out. We want to be surprised. We want to say, oh, yep, called it at the time. You don't want them to all play out, in my mind, if you're a fan. You want to kind of be surprised a little bit. So I think that kind of adds to the excitement all around in my mind.
Well, that's why they play the games on Saturday, and we are definitely going to have you back at the end of the season, and we'll go over that list too, and we'll kind of hold you to. We'll see a little report card on how you did.
Yeah, double crow, no slaw, please. I'll absolutely be held to it. I'll eat that crow. Please let me know. I'm all for it. That's what this job is. If you saw those comments, I mean, let me be straight up here. There were a lot of people that tried to bring me down, and if you saw some of the comments on 247, that's not going to hurt me whatsoever. I tried to handle it like a mature adult, just a 30-year-old here. I can sit here and stand in the paint and defend my takes whatsoever, and that's what makes this so fun. You could be right, I could be right. At the end of the day, we have two opinions, and right now, one of the best things we can do in college football season is debate them in a mature and respectful way, so we both hear people. I hear Florida State fans when they tell me that Jordan Travis should be on that list. If they can just kind of meet me halfway and maybe see where I'm coming from and respectfully say, hey, I disagree with you, I will see them in November and say, y'all were right.
All right, well, thanks for coming on, Graham. We really appreciate it. Can you tell everyone where they can follow you, find your work, and keep up with what you've got going on?
Yeah, hey, I really appreciate y'all having me back. You, again, have to bring me back at the end of the season, please, so I can be held over the fire and you can toast me again. Double crow, no slaw. You can read me at Swamp247. Follow me on Twitter at GrahamHall_. And if you want to listen to our podcast, hear all of my hot takes about Florida's quarterbacks and who they're going to face this season, you can listen to us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. That's the Swamp247 podcast. And again, looking forward to being back next time and talk everything with you guys.
All right, sounds like a plan. Thanks to Graham Hall from Swamp247 for coming on and chatting tonight. We spoke with him about expectations for the 2023 season. That will be coming out soon, so make sure you're subscribed and don't miss it. If you missed our video on how conference realignment could impact UF, click here.